Venture capital is broken. Most investors are treating it like a glamorous coffee club. But what happens when 6 unicorn founders decide to rewrite the rules?
A lot of people enter this industry on stories. They don't understand the mathematics of the distribution curves, and simply, I think they will not survive the next crash.
In a world obsessed with markets and business models, Daniel and his team at Ewor have a radically different approach. They're looking for one thing.
We're just so excited about finding people who are gonna be the future Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, really leave a dent in the universe and make a change.
And their contrarian thesis? Forget the business model, forget the market. There's only one variable that truly predicts outlier returns.
We believe all of the underwriting can be done on the founder level.
But they're not just rethinking who gets funded. They're reimagining where innovation happens.
The global outlier opportunities are going to be attached to some virtual place. And that's the goal of Ewor, that virtual Silicon Valley.
And this isn't just talk. 6 unicorn builders have put their reputation and capital on the line.
We're like 6 serial entrepreneurs, build unicorns, full-time support pre-seed founders. And that's one of the unique aspects.
The result? A venture model unlike anything you've seen before.
We've killed program, we've killed standardization. It's completely modularized and you get it when you need it without anything on top that you don't need.
Hear how 6 unicorn founders plan to rewrite venture capital. Listen now on the European Venture Capital podcast.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.
This show is not investment advice, and the hosts of this episode may be invested in the funds and companies featured.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the EUVC podcast. As you know, we're all about championing European venture, and today, on the announcement day of Ewor, I am sitting down with Daniel, and excuse me, because I didn't ask you before, Daniel Dippold. Am I pronouncing it somewhat correctly?
You are. You're perfectly.
All right, Daniel, welcome to the podcast. Today, we're going to talk all about Ewor, the whole structure, the whole ambition, everything you're doing. It's incredible what you've built already. The excitement that's built around Ewor is something that's nothing short of astounding. It's not often that we see fund announcement come out the bat with more than 2 million impressions across the different social media channels. So congrats on that. Daniel, welcome to the pod, my friend.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really excited.
Let's jump right into it. Tell everyone, Ewor, yourself, the team.
Yeah, let's go. I'm gonna introduce the team in a second. Then I'm also gonna shortly introduce myself. This is the slide, right? That gives it all away, I think, in one slide. You see, the thing that we believe really is the most important thing is like we give rebels, nerds, and visionaries access to global outlier opportunities. Yes, it comes with 500K. Yes, on top of it, you get like all sorts of perks and cloud credits and whatnot. It's probably worth another 500,000 or so. But I think the really crazy point is not the money. And that's not why we do it, right? Like many of the people, as you will see in a second, they've made their money, they could invest far bigger checks. What we're really excited about, first of all, is this rebels, nerds, and visionaries part. Like we're just so excited about finding people who are gonna be the future Steve Jobs, Elon Musk, who just really leave a dent in the universe, to use the words of one of those people I've just mentioned, and make a change and support them along the way. And maybe with our contribution, it's going to happen faster. It's going to happen in a more impactful way. It's going to be a little bit less of a hustle for that person and so on and so forth. So that's what we're excited about, finding those people. And then we want to give them opportunity that feels a little bit like you were born in Silicon Valley. And that's really my personal punchline here. I think if you were born in Silicon Valley 20 years ago, with parents who were both unicorn founders, the entire world was open to you. Like you got all of the opportunity, the talent moved to Silicon Valley, there was a massive brain drain, the customers were there, the investors were all there. Like you needed to go nowhere. And that's also why a lot of people just said, if I can't walk to the office of this person, I'm not going to invest because San Francisco has everything I need. And I think that's changing. I think in 2025 and beyond, Europe is, first of all, going to have a great time. We accept founders from all over the world, but we're all from Europe, and we run this with European roots. And it's so easy these days to fundraise in San Francisco, onboard your first customer in Dubai, and have your talent in Oxbridge. No problem. You can run a company that globally. And I think in this global world, the next crazy ecosystem is going to be a virtual ecosystem. It's not going to be a physical place. It's not going to be San Francisco. Those global outlier opportunities are going to be attached to some virtual place. And that's the goal of Ewor. We want to build that virtual place, that virtual Silicon Valley. And the moment you're part of Ewor, it feels like you were born in San Francisco with 2 unicorn founders as parents.
It's funny because I always say that what matters now is not our physical footprint. It's our digital footprint. I am a lot more alike with a founder in Berlin than I am alike with my neighbors here in small town Denmark that I'm in. And I really think that is changing everything about how ventures is being built or how VC firms are being built, because you no longer need to be in Berlin to invest in the best founders there. You've got to be in the same digital spaces that they are in. So tell me more about how do you then make sure that you become this connector of everyone that is trying to build something beautiful in the world?
Yeah, great question, because that was now all the talk, right? And the question really is like, how are we gonna do this? I have a couple of slides, maybe to run through the next 2 quick lines. The first slide is going to be about who runs this. And it's all unicorn and decacorn founders. I think that's the incredible part, who are full-time. And the second part is we do this in a way where we accept 35 people out of 35,000. So it's really not meant to be one of those other things of like, hey, aspiring entrepreneurs can try this out. What we built here is meant for the very, very few people who actually do have what it takes to build a company that might be worth between $1 billion and $1 trillion, or hopefully even more than that. Who knows what happens in 20, 30 years, right? And so first of all, let's start with the first slide, right? Like we've all walked the talk. Alex has built ProGlove, 500 million company. At least when he sold it, it's now worth over $1 billion. He co-invented design thinking. So he's really incredibly innovative. He's run IDEO as a managing director, which is when he invented design thinking with the co-founders of IDEO back in the day. That is really what makes Alex so exciting. He's not just an operator, he's not just an entrepreneur. He really deeply thinks about what does it actually mean to conceptualize a startup that is fully disruptive and can do that in an extraordinary fashion. I'm a mathematician and computer scientist also. Like I've started a company called New Now Group, building banking infrastructure, making it very easy for banks to change AI they've already built and deployed after they've done this. I've built a consumer app, Unlimited, which I sold. I've built a nonprofit, Sigma Squared Society, which supports entrepreneurs all over the globe in over 30 countries by now. And of course, I've invested before. I've done 50 angel checks by now, and many of us have. Flo, for example, has also done over 50 angel checks. So we've kind of all been founders and investors prior to running Ewor. Werner started the first ever privately owned COVID tracing app called Novid20 back in the days, scaled it to 80 engineers, sold the company. Her co-founder, Misha Kovachev, just raised an incredible round with his new venture. So the Novid20 mafia is really real. We have the pleasure of working with Werner. The other co-founders of Novid are setting up other exciting businesses. They've announced around last Tuesday. Flo built United Domains, 9-figure exit. Neubau Kompass AG was the market leader in new residential constructions. Flo was a business angel of the year 2018, co-founded Signature Ventures, is a Web3 fund that 14x within 4 years. He was the person setting up the CLA that is recommended by the German Standard Setting Institute. So also really strong legally. He actually studied law and is kind of our legal magician at Ewor. Paul built a trust. To my knowledge, he's the youngest German. He was 37 by the time of exit to make $1 billion plus cash exit. We're not talking about like, hey, like there was some sort of like crazy payout plan over the next 10 years and IPO or whatever. We're talking about like no full-on acquisition from AppLovin. Petter built SumUp, one of the biggest startups in Europe. I think they're still in the top 10 And maybe they're going to be top one, who knows? They're doing really well right now. But 8 billion at the last valuation, avid biohacker, a father of 3. By the way, Paul is a father of 1, Flo is a father of 4. And Alex, Quinton, and I are still kind of solo when it comes to children. And Quinton built Felix, like he's the only one of us actually who built a consumer case. So you do see a little bit of a huge distribution towards B2B here. But for anything B2C, Quinton is the guy. Felix raised 80 million, scaled to over 500 people, was acquired by Emmy and Bash, and of course then also started investing and recently joined us as a full-time partner, right? And I think what makes Ewor unique is that those are not the people on some slide. Those are the people working with every founder for 1 to 5 hours every single week. We do 35 founders a year, divided by 6 or 7 is around 6 per founder. So this is really, or per partner here. So we really have a lot of time, and we've set up Ewor in a way. We fundraised, like what I've just explained to you, fundraised for like 3-4 weeks. And that's been it, because we want to spend all of the time with the founders. And I think many great entrepreneurs out there, they raise big funds, they spend a lot of time on fundraising, they don't even have time for the founders anymore. And that's really where we want to make a difference, especially pre-seed, because many of the great entrepreneurs out there, they do seed and A because you can deploy more money, which we get. But the problem we really want to solve is great founders, like at the moment of inception, where you can still truly make a difference by Paul looking at your backend and setting up your unit economics from a backend perspective in a way that is globally competitive. Me looking at your, like math behind your AI and like figuring out something that makes this more defensible. Like Alex really helping you like ideate your commercial like growth experiments and so on, right? Like this is where we can truly make a difference. And this is what excites us. And at least by my knowledge, we're the only ones in Europe where like 6 serial entrepreneurs who build unicorns full-time support pre-seed founders. And that's one of the unique aspects.
Tell me, Daniel, how did you as a group manage to come together and dedicate your full-time ambition and ability with Ewor? Because it's quite often that we see funds with, I wouldn't say as many, but with many great unicorn founders and decacorn founders somewhere in the slides, but it's quite rare that they are full-time involved.
Exactly, right? And this is something that happened immensely organically. I started this as a side hustle alone and just kept going, and then cool things happened. And then Alex came on board and actually said, hey, I want to help out. And then Alex joined, and then Alex and I were part-time. And then Flo invested actually and said, this is really cool. I want to invest. And then we loved him so much, like we were chatting every week. At one point, he said, well, at this point, I might as well also join the business operatively. And then he joined as a co-founder.
Just because you've mentioned Flo a couple of times, this is Florian Huber,
yes.
Which I guess many in the audience will know, but maybe not as Flo.
Fair point, sorry. And whenever I use lingo that isn't like immediately clear, please, like correct me. And
I'll do my best.
Fantastic. No, so yeah, that is Flo is short for Florian. And then he came along, and then Bernard, I think, came slightly earlier also. And said, yes, this is great. I want to join as a COO. Then at this point, pressure kind of started rising, and we said, we need to take this all seriously. We kind of got to go all full time. And then we went full time. And then Paul said, hey, this is really great. Initially also put in 100K, then found it really cool, put in a couple million. At one point, we also said, look, but we're actually not looking for more money. Like we're looking for more time. So Paul started doing more and more. And then kind of Petter and Quinton came on board. And at this point, we already said, look, like at this point, we need to do this all full time. So actually, then Paul felt a little bit of pressure and was like, oh shit, like everyone is going full time. Like I need to do this too, right? And it was a really, really organic process. And this is incredibly important for me because it was not a kind of theoretical design where you say like, oh, in theory, this would make a lot of sense. We've all worked together a lot. We've really had a lot of time to experience each other, to see how we work together and make this long-term commitment. And we've all committed for the next 10 years to do this. Otherwise, we can, from each other, buy back many of our shares. So it's really a long-term commitment. We've said we all need to be all in, and if we're not, the others can take our shares. So it's a 10-year commitment that we've made, and otherwise, we can't deliver the promise to our founders, who are also in this at least for the next 10 years. And of course, the way Ewor is set up, legally, it can work for the next 30 years. So hopefully we will have so much fun along the journey that the commitment goes far beyond what I've just mentioned.
Just because now you mentioned a bit of structure here, and your structure is not completely vanilla. You have some money that is LP money, and you have some money that is on the balance sheet. Could you talk a bit about the thoughts behind that, and also specify to the level you feel is fitting?
Yes, of course. I want to do this rather high level, and anyone who wants to hear like all of the very minute details, of course, can always reach out. But we've made the decision to have one operative unit that runs we call it the academy, like the operative, value for the founders, because we really said we're gonna solve adverse selection, and we want to do something early stage where serial entrepreneurs who've had multiple 9-figure exits, maybe, which is empirically true, right? Like that we've accepted people who've sold their business for like 200 million, and then they've done Ewor. This is what we wanted to do. And we have 25 people full-time in that operative unit to do nothing but founder support. So like the moment you're in, this is what I said earlier here, right? It needs to feel like a virtual Silicon Valley. This is why we're all here. And this operative unit, it produces the costs are so goddamn insane. You could never run this on a management fee of a fund, right? So like because of that, the kind of fund was out of the equation. You just can't do it. Either you believe in it, and when it works out for the next 20 years, it will still deliver an incredible return. It will be worth all of that cost, but no sane person would ever pay for this. So we said only the people who run this full time, and they back this, they put this in, right? And that's what we did. We put in ourselves around 35 million, even a little bit more than that, to make this all run. And then the next part, of course, is okay, how does the rest contribute? Because we started doing so many co-investments with many great people out there, and they were all asking us to support us. But the structure we have in the operative business is just so goddamn different. And also legally, in order to just not be a fund, we cannot just go out there and kind of market this to investors. And this is simply not what we did in the past and what we don't want to do. So we kind of said, okay, like a registered vehicle that gives people the option to maybe support this might be the right choice, right? So we have this on top registered vehicle where people can basically index the Ewor fellows and be part of every future Ewor fellow from the point of investment. And this was more of a choice of saying the community we've built here of other entrepreneurs, they should be able to participate. If we win, everyone should win. So let's increase the size of the family and the size of the opportunity. And that's why we had this extra vehicle. I hope that makes sense.
Do you disclose the size of the committed capital to the vehicle?
Yeah, it's around, the extra vehicle is around 30 million in size.
I'm curious to understand how you guys think about it. I have probably two questions in one here. One is, I heard an interesting thesis from Mark Andreessen a couple of weeks back that started me thinking. He said, if you look at the private markets, you have seen banks going from being private to being public institutions. Then you've seen hedge funds and private equity going the same route. And what he's saying is then probably, this is the thesis behind A16 said, probably this will come to venture as well. The old partnership model will not sustain, or at least we will also see the rise of large scale enterprises where then, where you have an executive and so on, and you have a large operating organization, which when you realize this is the vision behind A16 set, you understand a lot of the decisions they've made. When I'm looking at you, my feeling is that you probably haven't approached this in the same way. However, when you plow 35 million into the balance sheet and run a very large organization right off the bat, because 25 people in platform roles and supporting roles to help the founders right off the bat, even for a 35 million fund, is just completely bonkers and nothing you'd ever do, unless it is because you have a play that is about building enterprise value within the structure, meaning what you would normally think of as the management company. I'm sure it sounds like your path to your structure here in the end was very organic and not this top-down analysis of how VC will evolve. But what you described kind of made me think I would be super excited to invest into the management company here, meaning Ewor, the place where there's 35 million in operating costs, which I guess right now you invest out of as well, but you could basically use to ramp up the organization as well.
Yeah, exactly. And that's how value is generated, right? It's more of a venture play. Ewor is a company. And that's incredibly important to me, right? Like we run a company, we're all operators, we're all founders, we run a company here. We run this company alongside our founders. Like we expect a lot from the Ewor fellows. So we want to show others that we co-hustle, that we're still hungry, that we still run a company here, right? Like the plays are different and they appeal to different interest groups. I want to comment on a couple of the things you said. The first one is a strategic part, right? I think any organic decision you make should be informed by a top-down analysis you look at when you look at the market. As a mathematician, I would find it childish to say, oh, let's just do what makes sense purely from a kind of emotional, impulsive perspective, because in the end, the bigger your organization gets, the more intricacies, the more dependencies do you have, and the less they are reversible, right? It just gets harder and harder. So the more strategic you need to be about your choices in terms of what is happening long-term, what is happening macroeconomically, like what kind of thesis do you have about, technology and so on. We have all of that. We discuss that all the time. I think we have an incredible analysis of venture and where we believe it will go and where opportunity in venture is and where it isn't. And funnily, that analysis is different to what you said about Mark. I actually don't know the exact quote, but from what you said, I would disagree with a couple of the points in there. And I know Mark is an incredibly clever guy. And, I've never met him, but from like what I read and like some of the blog articles, I think are just like genius, full stop. Yeah. But I disagree with some of the points. And if you look at at how private equity evolved, and especially if you look at the subsets in private equity that really, runs home like many of the crazy multiples, you are in an environment that is highly asymmetrical, like you have high barriers to entry, you have asymmetric distribution of information, and all of this kind of economic stuff that in like classic economic theory tells you, oh, there's an opportunity to beat the market, right? And in a public market, it's so perfect that there's no opportunity like this. And in a kind of private market, there typically is. The question is just, how does the convergence going to look like? And do I believe in a world where venture becomes perfectly priced? I don't think so. The reason of why I don't believe that is actually a mixture of chaos theory and complexity theory. Let's not go too much into the complexity theory part, but maybe the chaos theory part is interesting. So in chaos theory, you have incredibly high sensitivity to initial conditions, right? So you look at something that is highly nonlinear, let's say the weather. You forecast the weather to, let's say, a 20th decimal place of measurement. The moment the 21st decimal place changes, your 3-day to like 7-day forecast is really off because of that really teeny tiny change. That's what you mean when you say initial conditions. In venture, that is true as well. You make some decisions, some founders, they get some interest. There's so much nonlinearity going on. And within a couple of months, your decision is so nonlinear, and you make all of your money on that nonlinearity, right? It's a heavy tail distribution curve, not a Gaussian distribution curve. Whereas many of what kind of happens to banks is much more Gaussian, and that's also why they calculate with Gaussian models. It would be super stupid to calculate with Gaussian models in venture.
So to say, just to comment on before we talk Mark down,
yes,
or
yes.
Say that he said something that he did not say. The argument is not that what we invest in will go towards a public market. It is that the entities that invest will stop being only private companies on the hands of partners, but also because there's a lot of fragility in organizations when you have these transitional changes, which is why we see very, very few firms that have managed to do those changes. So his argument is we will see the entities, meaning A16Z, meaning Sequoia, meaning you guys, meaning the leading VC firms, going public and becoming organizations that are standalone, real entities, so to say, enterprises, rather than just these, cotton field shops.
And so actually where we just left off, right, I think there's a very interesting bridge. So let's say you have some of those niche opportunities, right? Like this would be something like a quant fund. You found out this one thing where, like, in a very nonlinear way, you make a lot of money with it, right? Like we're talking really financially right now. And like none of us here at Ewor is actually in there primarily for the money. Like we're in there because entrepreneurs change the world and we want to help more people do it. But let's look at the money, right? Because this is interesting for what Mark Andreessen said there. Were those quant funds, did they become public institutions and so on? No. Like they have a ceiling and they cannot scale beyond the ceiling, right? And I think this is what will happen to the best venture funds. Like they have a limited ability, and that's also why we cap it at 35. They have a limited ability to say, oh, I exploit this opportunity now with 35,000 people by investing in them all. This is not how it works. And there will be Y Combinators that do 400 founders at one point. Maybe at one point they will do 800. And they're closer to an index. And I think to the Y Combinators, this will happen. And there will also be like funds like Andreessen. It's over 40 billion, at the point where we are recording this. So you are talking way more about an index. And to those index-based solutions, I think this is very likely to happen. So I don't disagree like with like what Mark Andreessen here is saying in general, especially about the very big solutions that get very indexed. And I can totally see a world in where this happens to Andreessen. But personally, I don't think this is where the crazy returns are being made. And in this world, Andreessen Horowitz is simply just not going to do anything beyond 20% on a yearly basis. I think it will be far less than this, actually. Those opportunities that do less than this, I don't think they will enter into a similar structure that Andreessen will enter.
No, it's a completely different asset class from normal venture. As soon as you get the hybrid funds, and big conversation and super exciting, and I could talk forever about this, especially with you, Daniel. You're very informed. I'd love to ask you then, because you did say, and this is the nerdy podcast, so this is the place where we can talk about these things. You did say you have a very informed strategy for Ewor. Mm-hmm. Are you open to discussing that? Like, what is your view? Because I think what is super exciting and interesting here is you're a bunch of founders coming at venture. And I think we've seen that before. And I think we've seen it poorly executed before as well. Meaning you really have to be very smart and do a completely different model to come to venture and say we rewrite the rules. And I think that we've seen people trying to do it before where I just would say it has not worked. I'm not naming people here because I don't think it's worthwhile for anyone. But I'd be very curious to hear then, and I think everyone here in the audience would be curious to hear, okay, what does a group of unicorn founders, decacorn founders that come to our market and build their own thing, what is their view?
Let's start with the part on rules, right? I think there's some rules that can be rewritten and some rules that cannot be rewritten. And you need to be very clever about which ones you're trying to rewrite. The super pre-seed plays that come a little bit with like the operative support, they have historically had a very adverse selection. Only bad founders applied because those that didn't apply could immediately fundraise, right? And what we have, in my opinion, already empirically shown is that people who have all of the opportunity in the world, they want to do the fellowship. I think we have rewritten the rule that like there is adverse selection in a pre-seed play such as this automatically. And this is something I feel comfortable about rewriting. We thought a lot about this and it took us 2 years to get first initial empirical evidence for it. It will take us another 2 years in order to make the world understand that this is truly the case and happening, and maybe yet even another 2 years for this rule to be like exclusively true, right? So I'm not saying like, oh, we've already rewritten the rules. It takes incredibly long, and we've made an incredibly strategic decision about which ones to rewrite and which ones not to rewrite. Then there's of course other rules. For example, how does the distribution curve of venture look like, Gaussian versus kind of heavy-tailed? And I've seen a lot of pitches based on the kind of Gaussian part saying like, oh, I'm actually going to take out the outlier cases and I'm just going to finance like clear 5, 6, 7 X's. And with that kind of strategy, I move to somewhat of a Gaussian environment. And I think those are the rules you, at least me, like with my background, I wouldn't dare to rewrite a rule like this, because I think it's just the distribution of the equation. It's kind of how it works. So personally, I wouldn't be courageous enough to rewrite a rule like this, right? So you have a set of rules. You believe maybe 1 or 2 of them you can influence. Anything more than that is probably also batshit crazy, and it's way too much. So you need to be very prioritizing about those, and then you can have your strategy, be informed by it. And do I want to talk about the entire strategy? Sadly, I think it would take us so long, like there's so much we need to get through. Is that enough of an answer for your, for your question on strategy? Is that enough in order to kind of move on to the next slide, or should I give a little bit more away?
I would love it if you'd give a little more away. Maybe if can you answer it by answering the question, where do you think that you're most contrarian against the current venture model, so to say? Or what contrarian belief do you have around venture that is underwriting the whole Ewor model or the whole Ewor strategy?
A bunch of people say it. I think no one really does it. We believe all of the underwriting on the venture side, which is of course also then a prerequisite for an underwriting on our side, can be done on the founder level. We have invested in the shittiest business models, in the shittiest markets. You can pivot out of a market, no problem. You just need to understand what is possible and what isn't. If you invest in a person uniquely set up to build one special case in space tech, and they're building a space tech hardware venture, can they pivot? Probably not, because the founder market fit is like uniquely fits to this niche case in space tech, right? So you cannot simply underwrite on the founder. What we specialize on is we found a subset of founders where you can purely underwrite on the founder. This is not simple, finding this subset, and there's way more to it than I just explained. But once you found this subset, you can actually inform them. You just need a thesis about what works in order to inform the founder. We had one founder we worked with from Eastern Europe, a little bit of revenue, bad business model, bad market, not the best product in the world yet. Founder, absolutely incredible. Based on a thesis on pure underwriting on the founder, we backed him. We decided we're going to do some pivots, some edits, 6 months and so on. From then onwards, like the thing scaled to 3 million ARR from literally nothing. And we personally believe that if you do the pure underwriting of the founder and then have the resources to guide the founder to the right thesis, right? Like this is not trivial, because as an investor, you do have this bird's eye perspective, and it is incredibly useful. And you should use it in order to help people who don't have the bird's eye perspective, because they're all day operating, to inform. It needs to be an interplay between those two parties that is really productive. But as long as you can do that, I personally believe that you can do the pure underwriting on the founder, completely irrespective of what the business is doing, what the market is actually doing, and then help them develop into a great market with a great business model capturing enough value in that market and a technology scalable enough in order to capture that value within a very short amount of time. And that is truly unique, and I don't see anyone other really executing on it. I see some people saying it, but then if you look at what they do, declining and accepting paces purely on how the market does and what the founders do and the traction and so on. And that's simply not what we do.
I would definitely agree on both points. I imagine that I cannot ask you, so what's that What's that thing you've spotted? But rather, I would ask you. Well, so to those that think this is exciting, I do think that someone like Mike Maples Jr. has written some very cool pieces on exactly underwriting. So he underwrites based on the tech development, like the inflection that's happening technologically, society-wise, adoption-wise, and then the founder. And then what he says is whether the business model, whether the markets, whether all of these things align right in the beginning, that does not matter at all. If there's a strong tech inflection and there's the right founder, then it'll work. And that's kind of, at least his work around the importance of tech inflection points and capturing those is focused. And I think that it provides a great framework, and I imagine that people can definitely use that to maybe understand your thinking a little more. At least you use words that are similar.
I fully agree. And before I move to the next slide, I also want to say something quick about the context of all of this, right? Like, why are we thinking so deeply about this? Because we want to do it for the next 40, 50, whatever years, right? Like, that's really the goal. That's the anticipation we have here. And if you back incredible founders, because of course, I've done a whole spiel on hey, this is all for the founders. Like, we want to support the craziest people to change the world, right? If you lose all of your money 5 years down the line, it's just not going to work out, right? Like, you got to go back to something that earns you money. And we figured out how can we change the world for the people we support while still making a return that creates a positive flywheel, right? So I just want to put this conversation a little bit into context, right? I think you really need that impact thought of hey, how do I make an impact in this world? And then also that sustainable business model behind it, right? And we've just now talked about the sustainable business model and Ewor as an entity and the strategy. And if that's okay for you, I would love to bring us also a little bit back to the impact, and share those slides here. And this is the Silicon Valley thing here, right? That I've talked about. Our thesis kind of is, and I don't have the time to go through all of those people, but let's go through the person here in the middle, Fabrice Grinder, for example, who's also one of our backers, right? In my opinion, he's the best marketplace investor in the world. He started FJ Labs, insane return, over 1,000 investments. Honestly, to anyone listening to this here, I think they should also really consider doing something at FJ. I think it's one of the most incredible funds. But then, he also built OLX, which is a marketplace, and scaled it to over $1 billion, sold it. Is an incredible entrepreneur, incredible operator, ex-Princeton, incredibly intelligent. He backed Alibaba, Airbnb, Uber, crazy picks, right? And if you're building a marketplace, our job is to get you in front of Fabrice and say, hey, Fabrice, this is such an incredible founder. You ought to chat with them, right? And it doesn't matter whether you live in San Francisco and you can walk over to Fabrice, who's, by the way, not based in San Francisco, based in New York. We can leverage this ecosystem by making it like you're in this little village. And imagine that in this little village, there is Fabrice, there is Kevin, there is Haya, there is Andre, and they are the best in the world in something. Patrick, in my opinion, is the best in the world when it comes to deep tech fundraising. He raised over $1 billion for Lilium on one of the biggest visions to date. And you can argue about, hey, whether Lilium is good or not for the world. I think that if regulation would not have been part of the equation, he would have put this off. And I think it would have changed the planet for the better. And I think he's an exceptional founder. And when it comes to you raising your deep tech funding round, you gotta talk to Patrick. He's just one of the most incredible people to do this. And he's a PhD in aerodynamics himself. He's a founder, he's an operator, he's a fundraiser. He can tell you how it's done. So our goal, with Ewor here, is to create that virtual Silicon Valley in the way I've described it, by giving people access to the best in the world in whatever they need right now. And that's why Ewor is structured completely modular, because for every founder, it'll be different what they need. It'll be different what they want to achieve in terms of the next 3 months. Some of them need hiring, and those hiring probably want to talk to Kevin about how he hired a person who then, after he hired them as an intern, started a company called Palantir. And then you're asking yourself, how can Kevin hire such incredible people? How did he do it? How did he interview? That's probably what you want to do. But not every founder we back needs to hire within 3 months. So those people might not want to talk to Kevin. They might want to talk to Fabrice on how to structure the marketplace, right? So it's completely modular. Those are, by the way, some of the people that we're backing.
So now you're showing a slide that shows some of the names of the people that you're backed. I'd love to ask you to verbalize how you think about outliers, or what you call the 0.1% founder prodigies. I'm doing what I'm doing with the podcast purely because I love outliers, and I like just being able to talk to people like yourself is just that fills me with joy. And I knew from the get-go, I don't need to get rich. If I can do this all day, I'm going to have fun. So tell me about these 0.1% founder prodigies. How do you understand them? How do you recognize them? Now you spoke a bit about what type of company or firm you built to service them, but I'd love to ask you to really talk about how you verbalize your thinking around outliers.
Such a great question. And I resonate so much with what you just said. This is also why I'm doing Ewor. It just gives me so much pleasure talking to the people who are shown here in the slide. Actually, some of those people became, my best friends, with whom I like to go on hikes, with whom I like to spend time. I'm doing a birthday party in a week from now, and 2 of those people are coming. And it's a small group. It's only 11 people I invited. And it's what you just said, right? Like, that is quality of life to me, to never stop learning, to learn, from Jürgen about engineering, to learn from Ariel about multi-agentic AI, to learn from Lucas about computer vision, to learn from Rehab about hiring. It's just incredible, right? And to start with a little bit of concrete stuff of what you said, like, of course, you can look at empirical evidence, right? Ricky, 98x angel investor, I think 20x LP or something, had a 9-figure exit. Andrew Nutter built Bestwing, 180 million revenue when he left, right? This is like, okay, sure, outlier, right? You just see it empirically. Then there's kind of people, there's kind of a couple of first signs, right? Like Nick was, to my knowledge, that's what the Wikipedia says, the youngest person to receive VC. 16 years old, received VC, then raised $1 million, sold the company for 30 million. Like, what a crazy guy. Like, I remember my first call with Nick. I was so blown away by Nick, the way he talks, the way he thinks. I was in awe. I knew from a couple of VCs of how they looked at the market. And I said, like, as long as Nick is on this, I give a shit about the market. I give a shit about everything else. Like, Nick is gonna do this, right? And this is kind of this feeling of awe. Like, it's an outlier detection system. Jürgen registered his first patent when he was 12 years old, record holder in the British boat race when he was 16, and then Oxford. Ariel, the youngest machine learning researcher at Cambridge, he was a race car driver, really successfully, and then he does machine learning research at the age of 15 at the University of Cambridge. How goddamn crazy is this? And then Rehab emancipates herself out of Tunisia, and then studies physics and electrical engineering and gets herself a software role at Microsoft as a Tunisian woman. Like, how absolutely incredible is this? Or Lucas out of Munich working directly with Elon on 3D computer vision at Tesla. Like, this is, and like, I can verbalize abstractness here as well, but I think it's the crazy thing is you talk to someone and the feeling you get afterwards is just like, oh my God, like, this person, if anyone's going to change the world, they're going to be that, right? And it's sometimes also that listening to your intuition. I cannot give you a perfectly abstract definition of this being an outlier, but I can tell you that when you combine a little bit of abstract definitions and some rules with a little bit of intuition of what you've just seen as a founder yourself and what your co-founders have seen, you kind of get a good detection mechanism for outliers.
Do you think that venture can be done by someone who has not been close to outlier success? And when I say close, maybe you haven't enacted it yourself, but maybe you were a first investor and you were very close with the founders, and for that reason, that might be close enough. Well, what is your take there? Do you have to have been there?
To be very honest, I think you do. I think you can also become an investor and then do it afterwards and maybe burn the first couple of checks. But as long as you're committed, like really long term to like this, you can expose yourself to outliers, right? It's not impossible. And by you becoming an investor, you automatically get exposed to more outliers. It's a question of, do you realize and do you learn and are you willing, right? And maybe in the first 1 or 2 years it's not happening. So in the short term, I say no to your question. I think if you want to have success in the next 1 or 2 years, you already have to be exposed to outliers. If you want to have success within the next 2 decades, you can solve the outlier exposure issue yourself. Yes, but the definition of the venture distribution curve is a power law, and that power law is driven by outliers, and therefore you are in a job that is dedicated to outliers. That is purely the mathematical background of the profession of VC, and anyone who says something different is, in my opinion, lying, because it is violating the rules of logic. So yes, you do need to be exposed to outliers. And let's look maybe at the most successful VCs. Sequoia, the founder was a journalist. His job was to to be exposed to outliers. He was a journalist. Like, it's your job to find those crazy stories, of course. David Rowan, the editor-in-chief of Wired UK, former editor-in-chief, founding editor-in-chief, actually. Great investor. He was like, we backed this Eastern European founder. No one else wanted to back him. David was the only guy who said this person is crazy. Came in at like a 5 million valuation, then nothing happened. Then the 3 million ARR happened, and then people threw money at him at a 50 million post-money valuation. David already made his 10x. Journalist, right? David was the second person after us to put money into Jürgen Tweit. In incredible sense, as journalist. And of course, a great founder, and of course, a great investor. That all happened afterwards. The next group of people is former founders. If you look at Andreessen, Mark Andreessen, Ben Horowitz. I don't know if you read The Hard Things About Hard Things. That's what an incredible book.
Yeah, great book.
What an incredible story about suffering and learning. They were exposed to outliers because they're outliers themselves, and outliers know other outliers, and they were founders, right? And then there's other people that just happen to be some sort of different kind of investors. Maybe they were in PE before, or maybe they were in some sort of angel investing, and then they go into VC. And depending on how much they were exposed to outliers there, I think they're also going to be exposed to outliers in venture, and it works out. But short answer, yes, I think you need to be exposed to outliers. The definition.
Can I close on a super provocative question that'll get you in trouble, I'm sure?
Can I go through 2 slides and then we go on the to your provocative question, okay?
Go.
Let's do it. I mean, the results, let's skip over them. I think this is something I really wanted to say. It's the last thing I want to say, and then you ask your question. But the way we've built Ewor is we've reimagined 2 things. First of all, the virtual aspect, right? I don't believe in the post-COVID Zoom-based world, you need to be physically based anywhere. You can do it all virtually. And secondly, in the tech-driven world we live in today, we just simply don't believe you need a program. We've killed program, we've killed standardization. We don't believe any of that is necessary. When you do Ewor, you get loads of unicorn one-on-one time. I've talked about this. You want to hire people. You don't have to wait until hiring happens in the program. How much of a turn-off is this to those people? It's the biggest turn-off on the planet. If you say, I've done this 2 times, like, shut up, I need to hire now, right? That's the reality of what a great founder does. So what we've done with Ewor is we've completely modularized everything you see here. Hiring, fundraising, developing yourself, distribution, sales, like all of this. It's completely modularized, and you get it when you need it, how you need it, in the right magnitude, without anything on top that you don't need. Everyone always asks about, like, which problem have you solved at Ewor that no one else has solved? I think this is it. I think this is how we solved adverse selection, by building this modular system. And founders love it. We get a 10 out of 10 out of all of the time. The last NPS survey for the ideation fellowship was 100%. Which was a real big win for us. And the one for traction was like 89%. This thing here, this modular system, is working. And this is personally what I'm most proud about. But I'm going to stop here. I've chatted enough about Ewor.
I completely agree with you that you can build incredible things especially in venture. So not necessarily as a founder, but as a VC, you can be wherever you want to be. I do not think that the digital look in the eyes is that much less worth than looking someone straight in the eyes. My final question to you, which would get you in trouble, is I want to ask you, what do you think about the current state of VC? And by that, I ask you about the quality of the typical VC. So here I don't ask you to comment on your co-investors and the people you respect a lot, but maybe the broader spectrum of venture capital.
Let me answer this in a somewhat political way. When you already tell me up front, oh, you're going to get into trouble, but I'm still going to make this a bit of edgy because we're in a podcast. So I think the bigger the quantity within the power law gets that you observe, and then you build kind of chunks within a certain power law, these chunks start following that power law. And let me make this a little bit less abstract and more clear. VC is a massive power law because of the ventures. Most ventures don't make it, not because of the quality of the founders, simply because of other factors as well. Most of them also because of the quality of the founders, I would argue, but that's a whole different discussion. Kind of 1% of the ventures end up making like the majority of the return, more than 50%. Like this is the true statistic. Like 1% of ventures make more than 50% of the return of the industry. This is insane, but this is the way it works. And as long as the quantity scales massively enough, no matter if you build chunks of like 30, 40, which are portfolio sizes of VCs, these chunks, these subsets mathematically at one point will follow the distribution curve as well. So we'll see some small VCs that do incredibly poorly and some small VCs that do incredibly well. And the bigger the VCs get, and like talking about like what we talked about and reason and so on earlier, the less you actually have this effect. So what will happen? Some of the incredibly big VCs, they will become average simply because of the mathematics of what happens. They cannot only get the 1%. This is not how it works. By scaling, they go further along the line and they will become average. And out of the small VCs, many of them will do well and many of them don't do well. And VC now in Europe has happened for a long time. And because of that, we have simply seen so many funds fail. Most of them, similar to most of the ventures, they just don't make it because they follow the same distribution curve. I've once read, I don't know if this is true, don't quote me on this, but what I read is 90% of VCs in terms of DPI are losing money. I totally buy this. This doesn't mean you don't make money in VC. We are talking about the median versus the mean, right? Like it's just mathematics. So what do I think of the industry? I think the industry works. I think it's great. I think most people who are in that industry don't earn money. And those people who are in the industry for earning money, they should really think twice about it because simply it's incredibly hard and they are part of a power law distribution curve. And maybe they are not set up to earn money on this kind of power law distribution curve.
Is this connected to purely the mathematics of venture, as you just described, or is it connected to the quality and profile of the venture investors?
You wanted something edgy, so let me give you something edgy. So, you know what happens when some great stuff happens? I think my second investment was magic.dev. It was a first check into a foundational model that 3 years later was worth way over $1 billion. I see this, and of course I was motivated to do more angel investments. You see a hype, you see something anecdotal. The whole industry works on stories. A lot of people enter this industry on stories. They hear these overnight success stories and they all come and they're not willing to work hard. They want to drink coffee with people. They don't know how to build a venture. They're wasting founders' time. And those people, they come with a hype, especially 2021, 2022, lots of funds were raised that, in my opinion, do not, from a mathematical return point of view, deserve to exist. Simply because they don't mean it, they're not ready to suffer, they don't take the job seriously, they're not excited about value creation, they're excited about the stories. They don't understand the mathematics of the distribution curves they are like involved in. And simply, I think those people, they will not survive the next crash. They simply won't.
Daniel, I did everything to try and make people first inspired and then angry. So I hope to some that I succeeded. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me for the podcast. It was hugely exciting. If I should just jump into the shower with you here in the end of crap that you're going to receive for making out the final statement, I of course pursued it because I think you're very right. I think that venture is a power law industry, and I think that it is incredibly important that we, for the betterment of everyone, and I'm not talking about European venture, to those that think I dunk on European venture now. No, this happens everywhere. So in no way I'm saying that European venture is suffering from this problem. No, this is venture as an asset class. But I think that you're absolutely right that just as you have in startup land outliers, and you have the same in venture. And I think it's so important that people ask themselves, am I an outlier in this industry? Because the outliers are those to whom the returns will accrue. And I just would wish that people would ask themselves that question sometimes. Then I think we'd all be better off. Amazing, incredible. Daniel, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for that engaging conversation. We touched on a couple of topics that I don't touch on with anyone else. It was a real blast. Thank you for having me.
This was their finest hour.
Tear down this wall.
It's more than just an alliance. This is a union of values.
Let's start acting.